All right, so today we're going to talk about the Treaty of Versailles, and I'll give you a little background. Remember World War I, 1914 to 1918. In 1918, there was an armistice, kind of a ceasefire, in November of 1918, and really the reason that the Germans sued for peace is because of the British blockade, probably more than anything else. There were other reasons as well, but the British blockade was very effective. Remember, the British always have and still do a strong navy. And so, but remember, the Germans, and this is important to remember, were fighting mainly on French soil. So it wasn't like the French, the British, and the Americans were able to invade Germany and completely take over like they did in World War II, mainly the British and the Americans. So, but they did decide to sue for peace because the British blockade was very, very effective against the Central Powers, and of course, especially against Germany. And the official treaty that ended World War I was the Treaty of Versailles. And this is a very, very important treaty for understanding many things that occurred in the 20th century, and to some extent even the 21st century. Things that are going on in Israel or things that are going on in Iraq if you start, talked about a history, you would certainly spend a lot of time, of Iraq and of Israel, you'd certainly spend a lot of time on the Treaty of Versailles. And we could spend a whole lot of time on the Treaty of Versailles, but we're going to mainly focus on how it affected Germany, because that is going to give us, that's going to be important information when we talk about World War II. So, the German settlement. Well, again, after the ceasefire in 1918, Great Britain continued a blockade, essentially forcing Germany to sign the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, and so when you hear what Germany agreed to, you're like, well, what the heck? Why did they agree to this? Well, it was because, again, Great Britain continued this blockade. Okay, so the Treaty of Versailles burdened the Germans with what's known as war reparations. And what this meant was that they would have to pay an enormous amount of $5 billion per year until 1921. And you don't have to remember these little details. I want you to remember this. At which point an amount would be set which Germany would have to pay over the next 30 years. Now, the Reparations Committee later set the total at $33 billion, which was equal to hundreds of billions of dollars today. And what this meant, let me just throw it out there to you in Alan Parrish talk in English, Alan Parrish English. Basically what that meant was that Germany would have to pay a whole bunch of money, all right, to the nations they were fighting against, Great Britain, France, and to some extent Italy, although Italy was upset because they didn't get as much as they wanted, all right? Now in a more academic term or way, let me explain again that what this meant was that Germany would have to pay billions of dollars to the nations that they were fighting against in order to repair, that's where you get reparations, to help repair those nations. Okay, and so this put Germany into big time debt. And the way they handled it was dumb. They just started printing money. And of course, this caused inflation. And so throughout the 1920s, you had what they called hyperinflation, which simply means it was like not just a little bit inflation, but it was, multiplied times 10. To give you an example, I had a professor that he was at the time, he's still alive, but even when I was in graduate school, I was his teaching assistant, and he was old then. And he talked to a woman that was living in Germany at this time. And she witnessed this old lady who had a basket full of Dutch marks, German currency. And she was walking to the market in order to buy bread. Okay, just one thing of bread. She needed a whole basket full of money. And some thugs came over there and knocked her over and picked up the basket. And instead of taking the money, they dumped out the basket. All right, they dumped the money out of the basket and took the basket because the basket was worth so much more than the money. So this caused a lot of problems in Germany. So that's one thing. Another thing was that the French were allowed to occupy the Saar Valley for up to 15 years. And this was in Germany, and it was kind of an industrial area, and the French were able to reap the benefits of that. That upset, obviously, the Germans, because it was kind of like the industrial heartland of Germany. Much of what was called East Prussia. This was the eastern part of Germany before World War I, was given to a new country called Poland. Now this is very important. Germany was forbidden from ever sending troops within 50 kilometers, which is 50 kilometers, let's say 10K. If you run a 10K, that's 6.2 miles, so it's 3.1 miles. So Germany was forbidden from ever sending troops within 50 kilometers of the Rhine River. And this area was called the Rhineland, and so they could not occupy, they couldn't send troops into Rhineland, which is near France. So France is here, Germany is here, and the Rhine River separates them. If you take a train and you cross from France into Germany, you cross the Rhine River, and so the Rhineland was here, so they couldn't put troops there, even though it was part of their own land. Okay? The German army was limited forever to 100,000 soldiers. The German fleet the German Navy was eliminated. Warplanes eliminated. U-boats or submarines eliminated. Tanks eliminated. Heavy artillery eliminated. Poison gas eliminated. The most humiliating thing for most Germans, however, was what was called the War Guilt Clause. This is called Clause 231, and I want you to remember that. Okay, so in other words, on the test, I may give you an identification. It says War Guilt Clause or Clause 231. You need to know that they're the same thing. And basically, what this was it was an attempt to justify the harsh clauses, all right, by declaring that Germany alone. Now remember this. This is what the clause said: Germany alone caused World War I, which is not true. Although there's some historians that kind of argue that they were the main cause or whatever, but that's just been fairly recent scholarship. But you learned the causes of World War I, and that it was much more complicated than just Germany building up their army and invading people. The harsh settlement was imposed by force on the German government, which was allowed no role in the peace talks. As I said, the Allies, mainly Great Britain, maintained that blockade I was talking about earlier, which literally, there were people in Germany that were starving. Now, what you have to understand, what you have to understand is that during World War I, at the end, there was a revolution in Germany. And for the first time in German history, all right, they had a democratic republic. And this was called the Weimar Republic because the capital was in Weimar, Germany. And like I said, this was the first democratic representative government in Germany. And I guess the tragedy in the Treaty of Versailles was that instead of helping and nurturing this new democracy, again, this new republic, really. The difference between a republic and a democracy, I guess one can say, is that a democracy is more, let me see, I'm trying to think of an easy way to describe it. It's more, one person, one vote, whereas a republic, when people talk about a republic, it's more of a representative democracy where you have representatives go. But again, it's a matter of semantics, and people have kind of different definitions or whatever. But nonetheless, I mean, this was the first, let's just say this representative democracy in Germany. And instead of like really trying to help it succeed, basically what the Allies did in the Treaty of Versailles was they punished, all right, a new government that was not responsible for the war. Before in Germany, you basically had like kind of, I guess, a constitutional monarchy where you had a Kaiser, which was the monarch, but then you also had a parliament and you had a chancellor, and but the Kaiser had most of the power. And but the Treaty of Versailles, like I said, punished in a way the wrong government. Adolf Hitler, okay. Adolf Hitler's most popular and most persistent theme in the 1920s and early 30s before he took power, all right, was that the Weimar Republic, all right, had consented to Germany's humiliation. And World War II essentially began, all right, with a non-aggression pact between Germany and the Soviet Union, the two nations most harshly treated actually at Versailles. We didn't talk too much about Russia. What happened with Russia was they also had a revolution in 1917 called the Communist Revolution or the Bolshevik Revolution. Eventually the Bolsheviks, they had two revolutions in 1917, one in February and the other in October. Actually, some people, you'll see it sometimes March and November, depending on which calendar you use, because the Russians used a different calendar. But anyway, and they ended up getting out of the war of World War I. But they, again, they were not treated, and a lot of land was taken away from them as a result. But nonetheless, this, I kind of want to go back and focus on Germany because, like I said, they were very harshly treated at the Treaty of Versailles. And you could kind of look at, later what we'll see is that the Allies started, Adolf Hitler comes to power. He starts violating the Treaty of Versailles, and instead of stopping him, people at that point in the 1930s said, well, the treaty was too harsh, which of course they were right. The thing is that, Germany was a very powerful nation and is still a very powerful nation. Remember, I think I told you this in the Industrial Revolution lecture, that the second Industrial Revolution occurred in the United States and in Germany. So that shows you the potential that Germany had. And so the 1930s, people kind of felt like, the treaty was too harsh, and Germany's doing some things. They're building up their military, blah, 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 and we understand that. That's okay. The problem is like I said, Germany was a giant among nations. And if you tie down a giant and you start beating him and plucking his earlobe and stuff like that and giving him wet willies, all right, well, if you do that and humiliate him, you shouldn't do that. But if you do, you shouldn't let him back up, because when he gets back up, he's going to start destroying everything. And that's pretty much what happened. All right, so that ends our lecture today, and I will be posting one lecture a day this week, so keep up with it.